Begin here in a second. My name is Mr. Schmickel, and I want to welcome you to our annual Veterans Day ceremony. Appreciate you joining us in the auditorium. If you would please, each year we have veterans from our community attend and join us with our ceremony and our assembly. As you know, we always have to kind of like adapt to our situation. This year we've obviously come into our auditorium. We do have some visiting and attending veterans. If you would please, we'll put the house lights up. Join me in welcoming our attending veterans for this year. They're going to enter right over here. We'll go house lights up and give them a round of applause. We have active military joining us. We also have veterans from the Korean, Vietnam War, and more recent. Thank you, Warriors, for providing that warm welcome to our visiting veterans.
Elmer Davis once said, "This nation will remain the land of the free only so long as it is the home of the brave." Good morning, Waubonsie Valley, and welcome to our annual Veterans Day ceremony. This morning, students, faculty, distinguished guests, and members of the armed forces joined together to honor those who have and who continue to make military service a priority. These service members embody the notion of service over self, and today we take time to give our respect. Veterans Day came to be celebrated after World War I, when the fighting between the Allied nations and Germany ceased during the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The war officially ended 7 months later with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in June of 1918. Exactly a year after the fighting ceased, November 11, 1919 was celebrated as the first Armistice Day. On June 1st, 1954, Dwight D. Eisenhower signed legislation to make Armistice Day a national holiday and thus changed the name to what we know today as Veterans Day. To our warrior community, students, staff, and parents, to guest speakers, to the Aurora Army Recruiting Center, and to all veterans here today, thank you for joining us as we recognize and celebrate Veterans Day. With great pride for our country, each of us here is granted the opportunity to live with hope and ambition. But we must always remember that our freedoms come with a sacrifice made through the dedication of service women and men throughout the nation. At this time, we will begin our ceremony with the presentation of colors. Service members from the Aurora Recruiting Station will now post the colors of our great nation. Please stand. In 1982, social activist Frances Bellamy created an oath that students across America recite every day. The Pledge of Allegiance is a promise or oath of loyalty to the United States of America that is a mark of patriotism to the country. It symbolizes one's loyalty to the United States and the feeling that as an American, one is proud to be part of this country. So, will everybody please stand and join me in the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Mr. Durbin, choir, please prepare yourself for the national anthem. I am an American. That's the way most of us put it, just matter-of-factly. They are plain words, those four. You could write them on your thumbnail, or you could sweep them clear across this bright autumn sky. But remember, too, that they are more than words. They are a way of life. So whenever you speak them firmly, speak them proudly, speak them gratefully. I am an American. At this time, we will hear our wind ensemble and varsity choir perform the Star-Spangled Banner. Please join me in standing for our national anthem. At this time, please post our colors.
Forward, march. Center, face. Forward, march. Group, up. Post the colors. Post. Ready, front. Center, face. Breathing, on. Order, on. Center, face. Forward, march. Group, halt. Center, face. One step forward, march. Center, face. Forward, march.
This time we can have our choir go back to their seats. Everyone can go ahead and have a seat and remain seated. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Amari, for beginning our Veterans Day celebration. Appreciate that. Thank you, Wind Ensemble and Varsity Choir, and the presentation of the colors. Greatly appreciated on this day, Veterans Day, November 11th. Good morning, Waubonsie Valley High School. I have the extreme honor as your principal to welcome our faculty, staff, students, and many guests this year to our ceremony today, November 11th, on this Veterans Day. Let us begin our ceremony by first recognizing and thanking several of our special guests. First, our panel of guests today, Mr. Fred Jacobs, Mr. William Schmidgall, and Mr. Bob Bronson. Indian Prairie School District Representatives, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Nicole Howard, and Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Lewis Lee. Board of Education Representatives, Lori Donahue, along with Alderman of Aurora of our ward, Alderman Patty Smith. And a special thanks to Mr. Jason Schmidgall, our Assistant Principal, for organizing today's events. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. So this morning we come together as a community to give thanks for one of the most respected acts, and that is service over self. In celebration of this service, we'll hear from veterans on this panel today about the important ideals of patriotism, specifically those involving the Vietnam conflict, or what many of us come to know as the Vietnam War. When discussing about the possible panels and ideas for today, I found this one most fitting, specifically due to the fact that we have been asked to be part of an experience these last 2 years that has asked all of us to give beyond ourselves. This has been done by families as they have had to take on the burden of school at home, by employers and employees wrestling with vaccine mandates, and the general public in supporting our healthcare system by remaining as safe as possible. And as we know, each of these decisions, as I mentioned, they were mostly met with debate, each side looking at the other side to see where you're coming from and whose side you are on. Well, during the time of 1955 to 1975, in which the Vietnam War was fought as a country, we lost close to 60,000 American troops, in which many of those were drafted and served against their will, but in effect served for the betterment of their country and the concern of communism and the ideals we live through today. Imagine this conversation today in which 25% of our population, roughly about 650,000 young men, averaging the age of 18, were drafted to fight a war that many did not agree with or knew little about. These were the times in which our panel lived and served in. I am reminded of that as I begin to lead our school through a pandemic, and I often think, could this get any more challenging? And then I'm reminded, I'm not having to see senior students drafted to a war zone to risk their lives or put aside post-secondary aspirations for purposes they cannot quite understand yet. We think of mask and vaccine mandates are challenging. Try an 18th-month tour of duty in Vietnam as you're just beginning your young adult life. This is just a small part of the selfless service that you will hear today. So as we reflect on that, I ask our veterans here today to accept our gifts of gratitude, along with the immeasurable gift of educating our student body on the commitment of sacrifice that has been given for our country. It is our hope that this will further allow them to share with others this importance of service. On behalf of Waubonsie Valley High School community, I thank all of our servicemen and women here with us today for their sacrifices and their commitments to the enduring freedoms we so cherish. I will now call to help recognize our Waubonsie Valley students that are committing to the service here with us today. Miss Omari Banks will be doing that. Omari.
The decision to serve one's country is one of the most noblest commitments a young man or woman can make. Instead of pursuing a more selfish path, they commit to risking their lives to serve and provide for others. It is their courage and patriotism that drive them to fight for our freedom and defend our rights each day. Over the years, Waubonsie has seen many students go into military service either through enlisting or into the academies. This year, we recognize the following: Andrew Meister, National Space Force; Elliot Ricardo, Marines; Robert Ingram, Marines; Alonzo Landaros, Army; and Colin Longstreet, Marines.
Thank you, gentlemen. Each year, we bring a guest speaker or a panel of speakers to our school community who will present or reveal the experience of service, trials, growth, the picture of conflict. This year, we have with us a panel of 3 veterans from the Vietnam conflict. After being drafted into the Army, these men answered the call of their country and began their tours in very different roles. We'll hear about their service experience, learn about their time in country, and their role to support the U.S. military's role in the Vietnam conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Bob Bronson, Army, Fred Jacobs, Army, and Bill Schmidtgall, Army.
Thank you for joining us on the stage here, gentlemen, today. We have 2 mics there. We're going to do this in a bit of an informal interview panel type style. Truly appreciate you being here and sharing your experience with our students and staff. It's my pleasure to be able to interview you today. So why don't we start off, our first initial effort here is to understand the Vietnam conflict. Could one of you, along with introducing yourself when you start to talk, give us a little bit of an idea as to what the Vietnam conflict was all about?
Hi, I'm Bill Schmidtgall, and yeah, I'm responsible for Jason, so, and it was my pleasure. I hope it's your pleasure also. I was in the Vietnam conflict in 69 to 70, and we live in an imperfect but a very wonderful country that's better than any other place on earth. You can tell that by the immigrants who come here to better themselves and enjoy the freedoms we take for granted. And we went there for a purpose that basically is this. We don't live in an island. We can't exist in an island. We live in the world, and the world has bad actors who don't like what we do. And as a consequence, we were attempting to help to stop communism from covering most of Southeast Asia. So that was the basic purpose.
My name is Fred Jacobs. I served with the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam, 69 to 70. And as Bill said, the overriding assumption at the time of the war was that the domino theory, that if Vietnam fell to the communists, we would lose all of Southeast Asia eventually. And so the decision was made to defend them from the North Vietnamese and stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. That was the goal.
And so, how old were you, gentlemen? And I believe you were all drafted. Confirm that if you were, and then tell us what that was like when you experienced the draft.
My name is Bob Bronson. I served in the U.S. Army, and I was drafted in 1968. I had been out of college for about a year, and I was working. And what the draft was like then, I mean, I know a lot of you guys, you're wondering what you're going to be doing after high school. You know, you've got plans. Am I going to go to college? Am I going to do this? Well, what we had to think about in the days when we were sitting where you were is how are we going to satisfy our military obligation? Because every boy 18 had to register for the draft, and unlike today, you would be drafted. And the Vietnam War came along, more and more people were drafted. And I had been out of college about a year. I was working, and I got the infamous letter from Uncle Sam that said, "Greetings, your fellow citizens require your service." And so I went to Vietnam or Thailand. I trained as a communication specialist, so I ended up in an air mobile logistics company. The Army would always take a look at what you were qualified for and then send you to do something else. And after a few months of that, through some action there, some circumstances, I wound up and spent a year as a disc jockey on Armed Forces Radio.
Well, I too was drafted in 1968. I got married in February of 1968 and got drafted in December 1968. I had been going to college part-time. I couldn't afford to go full-time. So I was going to college at night, working during the day, and our family was just getting started. And as Bill said, or Bob said, the draft at that time took just about everybody. Later on, there was a draft lottery. I would have been drafted anyway, given the numbers that were drawn. But that's how I wound up in the Army.
We actually have Fred Jacobs' draft letter represented there. I assume this is something that just randomly came in the mail. You had to register when you were 18, and then this randomly came in the mail and told you to report at some certain time. Is that correct?
What happened was you registered at age 18, and at some point you would be asked to go down for a pre-induction physical. You were given a physical to see if you were qualified to serve. If not, you got a deferment, either a temporary deferment or a permanent deferment. But if you were qualified, you were classified as what they called 1A, and you were sent home to wait for this draft notice. And I took the physical in September and got the draft notice in December.
The physical basically said if you showed up, you could go, right? You're a warm body. You're on. I was drafted also. I got married in '67 in my junior year in college. Graduated in May of '68. Started working with Price Waterhouse and ended up needing to go to the military. And you know, that became not something I planned to do, but one of the most important steps of my career and my experiences to be able to have the honor to serve the United States in our military. And not all of you will have that honor or make that choice, but all of you, I caution you, have the awesome responsibility to be an informed voter, because the voters select the politicians. And in our country, the politicians decide, excuse me, how best to use the military. And a strong military is the best deterrent to the people who choose to take away our freedoms. So be that informed voter.
So after hearing about the draft and after obviously registering for the draft and then being drafted, tell us about where did you go for your physical, your PT, your boot camp, your basic training, I guess, and then what did the deployment look like? Was it immediate? Was it a 5-month time period? What did that look like?
I took my physical in March of 1968, and in April I got my draft notice. The physical was in downtown Pittsburgh, and there must have been about 400 or 500 of us. And they'd bring us in, you know, about 2 or 3 dozen at a time, all lined up, getting a physical. And then at the end of the line, you saw a doctor scribbling furiously on a piece of paper, and you wonder what classification he was giving you. And if you looked at it and it was 1A, you better start getting your affairs in order. And I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I went from the recruiting station in Pittsburgh. They swore us into the military, took us all on a bus to the Greater Pittsburgh Airport, drove out under the tarmac, got on a chartered Continental Airlines plane, and the next stop was Fort Jackson. Spent a week there, getting inducted into the Army, getting uniforms, et cetera, and then went to basic training at Fort Gordon, Georgia. And again, everything was down to the minute. You were a week at Fort Jackson. You were 8 weeks in basic training, 8 weeks in advanced training, and then you would be deployed. And so it went by fast. I mean, about 17 weeks after I was in the Army, I was on a plane going overseas bound for Bangkok. It was almost like a whirlwind. I hardly ever knew what hit me.
Well, I too got drafted in Columbus, Ohio. Was sworn in there and sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. And as Bob said, then I spent another 8 weeks in basic, another 8 weeks in advanced individual training. And I came out of there with a MOS, which is the military occupation specialty of 11B, 11 Bravo, which is infantry. So I was really looking forward to that. After AIT, the advanced individual training, I tested very well, and I was offered the chance to go to officers candidate school. It required another year or two of service, and I wasn't anxious to do that since I had just gotten married. I passed on that and was offered warrant officer school, which is basically a helicopter pilot, but that required additional training. I wasn't additional service years, and I wasn't anxious to do that, as I said. I finally accepted additional training for NCO, a non-commissioned officer. The Army was short of sergeants after the Korean War. They'd never geared back up again. And so they had special camps at Fort Benning, or special schools at Fort Benning, Georgia, where they trained us as non-commissioned officers. And I spent another 8 weeks in Fort Carson, Colorado for on-the-job training. And after a 30-day leave, I was sent directly to Vietnam.
Yeah, I took physical in Chicago. Ended up in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. Was offered, and they were looking for helicopter pilots, and I really wanted to fly, but I had a wife and a son at home, and I passed everything but the law portion of my CPA exam, and I didn't want to wait three and a half years to come back and do that sucker all over again, because that thing's not easy. So I chose to pass on that. So as Bob said, they kind of figure out what you're good at, and then they send you somewhere else. So as a finance guy, I was trained as a medic. So you can put that together and figure out how that worked. And it actually worked out great. I graduated from there, number one in my class. I was happy about that. But then I looked at the class and thought, well, that wasn't so good after all, maybe. Didn't have any orders coming out of there. Almost everybody from that class went to Korea and Germany, and I was a non-event. I didn't get any orders, so I was permanent party and temporary duty, I should say, in Fort Sam Houston, Texas for about 4.5, 5 months, and then ended up getting orders to go to Vietnam. Arrived the day before Christmas. Merry Christmas. And that was fantastic. So I had a great experience there. Well, I went to the Marical Division for a period of time. And for some reason, because I could type more than 100 words a minute at a time, had my college degree, all of a sudden I got pulled out of there. Maybe I was a lousy medic, I don't know. And I went to the U.S. Army Medical Command and worked in the intelligence group with a very high clearance to working for a major, a colonel, and the brigadier general who was the head of the U.S. Army Medical Command Vietnam. And at that point, I was able to experience a lot of interaction with the officers and with Westmoreland and some of the other people who came over, because I was a slide flipper, if you will, for our presentations, and had a great degree of respect for the officers in the military that I served with.
I'd like to add one quick thing. You know, when you're drafted out of a city or neighborhood like this, I was at a suburban Pittsburgh, much like this community, and you wind up in the Army reception station. You're seeing young men from all over the country, from every economic class, every walk of life, everywhere. In my basic training company, when I showed up, there were boys that had never owned a pair of shoes. Their feet were so wide they had trouble fitting them into boots. Had people that had never seen a doctor, boys that had never been to the dentist. So it was really an eye-opening experience. It kind of sets the record straight in your own mind about what's really happening.
So on the screen here, we have a map of North and South Korea, North and South Vietnam. We have the 17th parallel, Ho Chi Minh Trail, Cambodia there. Tell us about your time when you first got to country and maybe anything that you can reference here on the map. In other words, like the significance of the 17th parallel or the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Tell us about your time when you got in country and then anything you could point out there on it.
Well, you got the map up there, but you don't have the smell. You missed that. The rain we had today, we called a drizzle. That was nothing compared to the monsoon season. But the people, a lot of the people were extraordinarily generous and wanting help. I would say the lifestyle and the poverty that we saw compared to where we were at in this country was startling. It was unbelievable. I mean, fertilizer was human. Everybody grew their own food. It was incredible. But the people we spent time with at orphanages and working with those kids and giving them baths and giving them whatever, a little love and a little pat was absolutely heartwarming. So it's very challenging, very, very unsafe in most cases. A lot of times you couldn't tell who was friend, who was foe, but people were very gracious that we were trying to help.
Well, the 17th parallel was called the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, separated North Vietnam, South Vietnam. I was sent to Pleiku, which is about the center. It's in Tu Corps. Vietnam was divided, South Vietnam was divided into roughly 4 equal areas. The one closest to the DMZ was called the number 1 Corps, or I Corps, then 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps. The Marines were basically up in the I Corps area along the DMZ. That's where the Battle of Khe Sanh was fought. I was in 2 Corps near Pleiku, and I was with a mechanized infantry outfit. We had all APCs, armored personnel carriers, and we spent a lot of time guarding the highways from east to west so that convoys could move through there safely with supplies. And we also were charged with interdicting the troops coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail from North Vietnam. They would come down through Laos and Cambodia. Laos and Cambodia were both neutral countries, but they kind of turned their eye to the communist North Vietnamese coming down through the trail. They would come down through Laos and Cambodia and then move eastward into Vietnam and cause the problems there.
When I was sent over, I was sent to Thailand. And if you take a look at the map of Thailand, you see Laos there in the top northeast corner. I was stationed right, when I got over there, with an air mobile supply company right on the Laotian-Thai border. And at the time, our political leaders were insisting that we were not going into Laos. Well, we were. I was there. It was just something that you didn't say anything about because we weren't supposed to be there. But we had troops in Laos. We had special forces, and as Bill was saying, they were helping the North Vietnamese army was coming through Laos in order to fight us and get better supply lines, and we were fighting them from there. So that was a lot of activity up in northern Thailand. And about 3 months into my tour, I had some rather interesting circumstances that I won't go into happen, but they were really kind of funny. I was asked if I ever had any experience in radio, and I said yes. I was a college radio sports announcer. And so I no sooner said that than I was transferred down to southwestern Thailand on the Gulf of Thailand to an air base, and I served the rest of my tour as an announcer, disc jockey, and sportscaster on Armed Forces Radio. And from that air base that I was stationed at, the U.S. Air Force flew the B-52 bombing missions over North Vietnam. Plus, the refueling missions had 707 tankers that would refuel fighter planes. We must have had maybe 1,500 or 2,000 aircraft on the ground there. It was one of the biggest air bases in Southeast Asia. And every once in a while, you'd see the B-52s coming back, and there'd be 2 of them, meaning they lost one. And then we'd see fighter planes over the air base coming back in the missing man formation, meaning they'd lost one of their fighter planes. So we weren't that close to the action there when I was down at southern Thailand on the radio, but we could sure see it every day.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry to say that we've quickly run short on our time this morning, and I feel like we've only touched on your experiences. I want to thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your service, and thank you also for educating our students as to what that service looks like and the service above self with that. What a round of applause for our veterans here. Those gentlemen will be in a breakout session, third period, right here in the auditorium, if you and your teacher are interested in hearing more from that group. This time, Cullen.
Choir, please take your position for the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Patriotic songs have the power to bring people together in a musical celebration of unity and love of country. Few songs in our nation's history have inspired a country so profoundly. We invite you to hear the meaning of the lyrics of this hymn and their significance to the struggle of battle as the song is performed by our amazing varsity singers and wind ensemble.
Thank you, choir. Thank you, wind ensemble. At this time right now, as we sit here, there are soldiers who are currently on active duty serving our country. These men and women have chosen to leave their families, friends, and comfortable life here in America to fight for the freedoms of others wherever they may take them. We are lucky to have a local chapter called Operation Support Our Troops. This local chapter collects snacks and other needed supplies by our active military. Over the past week, we've collected these supplies and snacks, and we've collected 55 boxes. We wanted to outdo our goal from 2 years ago, which was 52, so well done. We'll have this available in our atrium on Friday as well if you want to continue to add to this. We do this in honor of Sergeant David Caruso. He is a 1998 graduate from Waubonsie Valley High School who lost his life in the Battle of Fallujah. His parents are here. Joe and Gloria Caruso join us every year at this Veterans Ceremony, and we appreciate their attendance and their participation. And we mourn for their loss, and we recognize David and his sacrifice for our country. At this time, Colin, please join me at the podium. Retiring of colors.
At this time, we invite the members of the Aurora Recruiting Station to retire the colors of our great nation. Warriors and honored guests, please stand.
Well done, Colin. Thank you.
Center, face. One step forward, march. Center, face. Forward, march. Ready, go. Center, face. Reset, march. Order, on. Retrieve the colors. Ready, up. Center, face. Forward, march. Ready? Up. Center. Face. One step forward. Mark. Center. Face. Forward. Mark.
Observing Veterans Day is an honor for me. I myself did not serve. However, I'm reminded of the true measure it takes for an individual to put their life on hold for others. Today is an opportunity for us to show gratitude and respect to those who served. Find ways to positively live out your dreams and impact your communities, and in this way we honor their service. It is with great pride that I thank you for your time and attention today. As with any gathering of warriors of 3 or more, I ask that you join me as we break this out. On the count of 3, we'll say warriors. 1, 2, 3, warriors. Thank you to our veterans, staff, and our students for attending.